Good morning, everybody, and welcome to session 4 of OBWB's Source Water Protection webinar series. Today, we will be talking about increasing awareness and stewardship of watersheds and drinking water resources. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar on the traditional unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. I'm located in Kelowna, BC. And because we are joining from all across BC and from Ontario and beyond, I would really encourage you to take a moment to think about and acknowledge the traditional territories you're joining from. So today, as we have in the past few weeks, we'll start with a quick intro from me. And then we are lucky today to hear from 5 panelists that are joining us from Ontario. And then we will end the session with a Q&A. Few housekeeping items. Just a reminder, if you've missed any webinars, they are recorded and are already posted on the Source Water Protection Toolkit website. We've got some training credits that are available for these webinar series. And I just want to encourage you to go ahead and submit questions anytime during the webinar using the Q&A feature. So not the chat feature, but the Q&A feature. And then we can hopefully get to them at the end of the session. And once again, a big thank you to everybody who was involved in this project. It was a highly collaborative process to develop this toolkit and these webinars. We had a 40-member technical advisory committee that worked on developing toolkit content. And we've had funding from Ministry of Municipal Affairs, Interior Health Authority, City of Kelowna, City of West Kelowna, and most recently through the Healthy Watersheds Initiative through the province of BC. Thanks, everybody. And a reminder, this webinar is part of a 9-session series. We hope to see you next week, where we'll have Deborah Curran and Rod McLean talking about local government policies and regulations to protect water sources. And just another sneak peek into the remaining 4 webinars after next week. So we'll be talking about securing funding, using natural assets and green infrastructure to protect water quality, using mapping to understand and manage risks to drinking water, and then lastly, monitoring and reporting for source water protection. So here's what the toolkit looks like for those of you who are just joining us for the first time. It's got these 4 sections, and just a reminder that webinar 1 focused on part 1 and part 3 of the toolkit, whereas these subsequent webinars are focusing into the tools. And the entire toolkit's available as a PDF document, but it's also been completely transferred to a website, sourcewaterprotectiontoolkit.ca. And just another look at the toolkit. So basically it was designed to simplify the source protection planning process for local water suppliers and allow them to learn from other communities who are doing source protection planning. And so we've got the source protection plan in BC has 2 components, source water assessment and response plan. And then in order to carry out your response plan, you've got these tools. And like I said, the webinars are diving into the tools. So the session today is on education and engagement. And that chapter in the toolkit talks about 4 main things. So the community engagement spectrum through the International Association for Public Participation. So there's a discussion about that and the different kind of levels of community engagement. And then there's a 5-step process for building and delivering a business case for source water protection. Another 5-step process for following or for engaging your communities. And then a whole big table of education and engagement tools, what they are, how to use them, what situations you would use them in. And then we've got case studies in there. And one of the case studies in the toolkit focuses on Ontario and the great work that they are doing in Ontario to coordinate and coordinate communication and outreach across the province. And so today we're lucky to be joined by 5 folks from Ontario. The first is Beth, and Beth works in Source Protection Programs branch of the Ontario Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, where she provides policy and program expertise to people working on local source protection plans. Second, we'll hear from Joanne, and Joanne works for Conservation Ontario, where she collaborates with a range of partners to research, develop, and deliver outreach and stewardship initiatives to address a range of watershed resilience challenges. Madison is the Source Protection Program Manager with Conservation Sudbury, and she has a background in biology and environmental impact assessment. Then Martin is the Source Protection Program Manager with the Grand River Conservation Authority in Cambridge, Ontario. Martin's expertise lies in water resource management, risk management, project management, and policy development. And then our last speaker will be Mary Lynn. She's the co-supervisor for the Drinking Water Source Protection Program in the Ausable Bayfield Conservation Authority. They recently released 7 videos starring their Source Protection Committee members, which we'll hear about today. So with that, I'd like to invite Joanne to share her screen.
We have it there.
Looks good, Joanne. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kelly, for that great introduction. I'm really happy to be here and to be talking to you about Ontario's Source Protection Program and about stewardship and awareness. So I wanted to give you a really, sorry, if you could go to the next slide, please. I wanted to give you all an overview of the program in source protection before kind of delving into the specifics. So for anyone who isn't aware, there was a tragedy that occurred in a little town called Walkerton in Ontario, where the town's drinking water became contaminated with E. coli. 7 people died and thousands became ill. And because of that, there was an inquiry. And out of that inquiry came a number of recommendations. So one of the responses was creating Ontario's comprehensive drinking water protection framework. And that focused on, there was a focus on prevention. And that's how the Clean Water Act came into being. So that was in 2006. And the scope of the Clean Water Act is to protect existing and future sources of drinking water from contamination or depletion. So to achieve this, the Act and its regulations set out rules, responsibilities, and requirements for the protection of sources of municipal drinking water, and also established 38 source protection authorities with responsibilities under the Act. To keep it simple, conservation authorities generally act as source protection authorities in Ontario for their designated watershed-based source protection areas. And I know that that's a lot of lingo there to be thrown around, but I know that in the next presentation, Conservation Ontario is going to delve a little bit more into those people and their responsibilities. I'll just kind of touch on it at a high level here. So Conservation Ontario, who is presenting next, is an association that represents conservation authorities, and the Ministry of the Environment has a really close partnership with Conservation Ontario. Along with the addition of or creation of source protection authorities in Ontario, there were 19 local multi-stakeholder source protection committees that were created. And there's a picture of one such committee just in the bottom there. And they were created in order to use a science-based approach to identify local activities that could pose a risk to their water supply and to develop a source protection plan to manage the risks. So you'll see on the right there, we've got a snapshot of the South Georgian Bay Lake Simcoe Source Protection Plan. So those source protection plans there's 19 source protection committees. They developed these plans that included policies to protect drinking water sources within vulnerable areas that were set out in the plans. And the purpose was to prevent those drinking water sources from being contaminated or depleted. Next slide, please. Great, so this just kind of gives you a nice high-level picture of the key elements to the program in Ontario. So the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks has overall program accountability, and we maintain legislative and regulatory foundation and scientific framework. And we also collaborate across ministries in the province. The source protection authorities that I mentioned before, they maintain the source protection committees and provide administrative, technical, and scientific support to the communities and municipalities. They have legislative responsibilities under the Clean Water Act and provide critical support to municipalities and other implementing bodies. Then we have those source protection committees that I mentioned, the multi-stakeholder committees. So they're made up of municipal representatives, economic representatives, and an other category, which can include NGOs, it can include public health officials, it can include just general members of the public as well. And then we have implementing bodies, and those are the people that are responsible for implementing the policies in those plans. The majority of the policies in the plans are directed at municipalities, with some also directed at provincial bodies and conservation authorities. Next slide, please. So this just is highlighting the collaboration and partnerships within the province. And really the reason why I'm highlighting this here is because it is so essential when it comes to raising awareness about source protection. And without that, I don't think we'd be where we are today. So the program in Ontario is built on strong partnerships and collaborations between the Ontario ministries, source protection authorities, source protection committees, and municipalities. And we've kind of enshrined the importance of source protection in the Conservation Authorities Act in Ontario. So it's a mandatory program now for conservations acting as source protection authorities to deliver. And source protection authorities also receive provincial funding to ensure the ongoing delivery of the source protection program in Ontario. We also partner with Conservation Ontario, who, among many other things, coordinates with source protection authorities to develop customizable outreach materials. And that supports the education and outreach policies in local source protection plans. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that there's those source protection plans in the province, and I think most, if not all, source protection plans in the province contain a whole number of education and outreach policies to get the word out there. So this gives you an example of the types of policies in plans that are aimed at increasing awareness and engaging the public about source protection in order to educate and influence positive behavior. So one of the big ones here is designing, manufacturing, and installing signs on provincial highways and municipal roadways within those vulnerable areas around drinking water systems. So you'll see a little snapshot of one of the signs, and that's a sign that's used across the province. It was the design of the sign was developed by the province in collaboration with our source protection authorities. And that's what we ended up with, and that's all across Ontario to raise awareness. There are also policies aimed at encouraging actions like increased water conservation, proper handling and disposal of fuels or other chemicals through social media, guidance, fact sheets, and that's shared with municipalities and the general public. There's also policy types that help landowners understand the objectives and benefits of septic inspection and maintenance programs. And the bottom right corner, you'll see a picture of a pamphlet that was developed by one of the source protection authorities. It's just a general pamphlet on protecting water from source to tap. I don't want to get into too much because we'll have source protection authorities speaking to you later and the amazing products that they created, but that's just a snapshot of one of them. Next slide, please. These are just some of the education and outreach resources that the ministry has developed to really promote collaboration and increased awareness. So we have the Source Protection Community of Practice, and this is just a dedicated SharePoint site it's a members only website where it's for source protection authorities and the chairs of those source protection committees that I mentioned. And that's where we can upload all sorts of guidance and technical documents, share different types of materials, including education and outreach materials, engage in discussion. It's just a great place for all of those and to promote different activities that all the different source protection areas are doing. There's also risk management official and inspector forum. And without getting into too much detail about that, there were new tools that were included in the Clean Water Act that provided a way to address drinking water threats beyond existing planning and regulatory tools. So those new tools are implemented and enforced by municipally appointed risk management officials and inspectors. So that's what I mean when I say that. So that's another SharePoint site that was created where those risk management officials and inspectors can go in and look at technical documents as well, guidance documents. We answer lots of different questions from local risk management officials and inspectors. And it's also a place for risk management officials and inspectors to share and collaborate. There's a discussion board for them to do that. Lastly, I'll just promote the ontario.ca source protection landing page. So that's just the Ontario province's website that speaks to source protection generally. It includes links to all the source protection plans in Ontario. And it also has a link to the provincial mapping tool. Next slide, please. So the Provincial Mapping tool is one of the things that we are very, very proud of. We call it the Source Protection Information Atlas. So it's a public-facing mapping tool that provides external partners, provincial ministries, stakeholders, and the general public with the ability to quickly determine a property's proximity to a vulnerable area and where source protection plan policies could apply. So you'll see a snapshot there, and there's also a link to it. But you can very easily just Google Source Protection Information Atlas Ontario and it should pop up. But you'll see, Ontario there. I don't know if you can make out the little kind of pink areas. Those are the source protection areas within the province. And if you were to use this tool and zoom in, you'd start to see vulnerable areas for each municipal drinking water system pop up. And then you could click in those areas and learn more information. So this mapping tool is really a collaborative initiative with the source protection authorities in Ontario. So we collect and standardize and provide a provincial picture of vulnerable areas in the province. Also, other ministries use this, like our Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, etc. So we're really trying to make this a one-stop shop for people. There's also a climate module in the Atlas that pulls data from a provincial monitoring center, and that provides real-time data for climate readings across hundreds of stations across the province. Next slide, please. So lastly, I wanted to highlight the Campaign in a Box Toolkit. This was something that was created by the ministry and launched back in 2017. And its purpose was really to promote local planning and development and implementation of education and outreach. It was designed for municipalities in mind and conservation authorities and those risk management officials that I mentioned that have education and outreach policy responsibilities. So we had, when it was launched in 2017, we had a couple of outreach sessions just to explain the tool and promote the tool, and it is available through the Conservation Ontario's website. But just a high-level overview, the Campaign in a Box Toolkit essentially has 4 parts. It's really designed with all sorts of users in mind, from someone who has never developed a communications plan all the way down to someone who knows it very, very well and kind of just is looking for some resources to help. So the first part is really just an in-depth descriptive information for planning, such as guides with helpful information on designing and evaluating an education and outreach campaign. The second part kind of goes through in more detail all the components of a communications plan and provides tactics that you can use to reach audiences. We also kind of wanted to have a focus on tactics that are low cost and easily implemented. The third part of the Campaign in a Box Toolkit just has examples of communication materials. So like sample communication plans, web content, news releases, articles, etc. And those examples can be used as is or customized as you see fit. And the fourth part is really for, it is really just more of an appendix that contains templates and resources for creating tactics. So there was a lot of infographics created for this, and it can all be customizable. And that was really to promote efficiency across the province. So any one implementing body or source protection area or municipality could really just take something like an infographic and put their logos on it as they saw fit, and then release it to the public or whomever they wanted to get the word out to on source protection. And that was really the drive behind doing this, was that something that everybody could use. And that is it for me. I know that there's a Q&A session at the end of this, and I don't want to take up too much more time, but my contact information is on the last slide and my email address. And so if you want to reach out, please feel free.
Thank you very much, Beth. Now I believe we have Joanne.
Whoop. Here we are. So it'll be good morning in BC. Thanks very much, Beth. It's great to follow you. I'm really happy to be here on behalf of Conservation Ontario. And I know that there are people here from the Okanagan as well as others from across the country. So I'm really pleased to be here, and we're really pleased to learn about the toolkit that you're developing and to be part of it. So I'm responsible for business development and partnerships at Conservation Ontario. Once again, I'd like to thank our partner, Beth from Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and my colleagues who are source protection managers representing CAs across the province today. I'd also like to thank Debbie Balika, who's our source protection lead at Conservation Ontario. And unfortunately, she sends her regrets, and I'm pitch hitting for her, I guess it is. And so she did a lot of the work to put this slide together that I'm about to deliver, the slide deck. And and I've also got to move the slide deck along. So thanks for your patience with me. I hope I remember to switch the slides. So Conservation Ontario is the network of the 36 conservation authorities in Ontario. And we work on their behalf to deliver a number of services and activities, and they're listed here. And it's everything from policy and program development, communications, education and training, government relations, and of course, drinking water source protection. We're governed by and funded by conservation authorities, and we undertake a range of projects that are also supported through government and non-government sponsored funding programs, agreements, and contracts. So conservation authorities are unique to Ontario and organized on a watershed basis. There are 36 of us across Ontario, and we were established by municipalities and provinces in the 1940s in response to severe flooding and erosion problems in Ontario. Conservation authorities are either charitable or nonprofit organizations, and were legislated under the Conservation Authorities Act. 95% of Ontario's population lives in a watershed managed by conservation authorities, and or one of the conservation authorities. And for those of you in the rest of the country, it's about 40% of our population of Canada. So there's lots of pressures in the areas that we manage. There are 38 source protection authorities, or SPAs, with the 36 CAs, and also include our non-CA members. They are the Severn Sound Environmental Association and the Northern Bruce Peninsula. There are also regions that include multiple source protection authorities. For example, the Trent Conservation Coalition Source Protection Region is comprised of 5 source protection areas and over 50 drinking water systems. The Quinte Source Protection Area is its own entity. Quinte successfully negotiated with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks to stay in its own area, as technically it's made up of 3 watersheds. Within the Quinte SPA, there are 11 municipal drinking water systems that supply water to approximately half the watershed population. Conservation Ontario's role in drinking water source protection includes coordination at the provincial and regional levels, drinking water source protection communications, which is the theme of one of the themes of today, climate change vulnerability assessment tool training, and a knowledge building series. Leadership to the 36 source protection authorities in the delivery of the drinking water source protection program is the main part of our role. And we provide guidance in support and strategic direction, supporting the implementation of the Clean Water Act to the 38 SPAs. There's a joint advisory committee that's composed of the director of the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and the Source Protection Branch. And it includes Conservation Authority general managers, there's 4 of them, and the Conservation of Ontario general manager. There's a project manager working group, which involves all 19 project managers and Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks staff. There's a drinking water source protection communications working group. That includes a number of representatives, including the project managers and CA communication staff, as well as MECP. And then there's a climate change and vulnerability assessment working group with technical staff and project managers. And then there's also the Ontario Road Salt Management Advisory Committee. We are the co-chair, Conservation Ontario co-chairs that, and others are engaged, including a number of the organizations and people noted previously, as well as municipalities. And the federal government is also involved. So we also have a communications working group, and that's a large group of members, which includes the Source Protection Project Managers, CA or Conservation Authority communication staff, as well as the MECP staff. The balance of the membership allows for inclusion of different perspectives from the technical drinking water stewardship program framework and practical considerations for communications from communications experts. The working group meets 4 times a year, and the purpose of the group is to share ideas, resources, and activities to support the drinking water stewardship drinking water source protection program. In addition to sharing resources, the Drinking Water Source Protection Communications Group helps to identify any gaps and then works together to create solutions or make improvements. Recently at each meeting, the larger group has been breaking into smaller breakout groups, and that's for smaller discussion on focused questions. For example, at the last meeting, the focus question was on calculating the metrics of engagement through social media, in addition to comparability of statistics and the individual metric. Discussions like these assist in continuously improving communications for the DWSP. As mentioned, this DWSP working group meetings can precipitate the identification of gaps and smaller subgroups that can be created to tackle an issue for a specific or collective campaign. The DWSP campaigns have been successful as they've been collaborative in nature, and that was mentioned previously by Beth. The most important piece of this is all the collaboration that we undertake. There's a co-production model that provides a good model for co-development with equitable decision-making and equal workloads. The themes of the campaigns are co-decided and support the Drinking Water Source Protection Program through integrated and innovative communication products. Campaigns are delivered by Conservation Ontario with support from the MECP and by conservation authorities and the source protection authorities and other stakeholders. Photos, graphics, other materials are provided to other partners, including municipalities, through the project managers, and the MECP mirrors the campaign materials on the Community of Practice platform. Conservation Ontario also supports source protection authorities in developing various education and outreach products, such as the general fact sheets like the In the Know about H2O that you see here, to more specific topics like drinking water threats and calls to action. Other products include videos like Max and Sam, which was a fun, informative animated short video that ran in Cineplex Odeon movie theaters during the previous previews back in, I think it was 2018. And we maintain a repository of pretty well all communication material on our website. And we have a members only site as well, but there is a public facing education and awareness page that people can access. And that promotes individual source protection authorities and plans. I'm really looking forward to hearing more as soon as I get off this presentation. So another thing as well is the education and awareness is ongoing. And so we use provincial, national, and international awareness days to link to the DWSP program. So for example, there's awareness days like Earth Day. That's a great opportunity to highlight the program with a link to videos. We also have seasonal campaigns using the co-production model that was mentioned. The campaigns usually run 15 weeks in length and provide 1 post a week with text and images on Winter Wednesdays or Water Wednesdays. We also have a number of special campaigns. In addition to social media campaigns, there's more focused special campaigns created to highlight an element of the program. And that, of course, promoting awareness and education. There's been campaigns including Trust the Tap. I had promoted safety measures that municipalities and source protection authorities and others took to ensure that drinking water is safe for the public. And more than 80% of Ontario's population receives drinking water from municipal drinking water systems. So that makes it really important. And in particular, this campaign has demonstrated that a lot of success. Apparently there were various tweets from the campaign viewed over 7,000 times. Our most recent produced successful campaign was focused on the drinking water source protection road signs, and they identify vulnerable areas or drinking water protection zones. And these are areas in municipal wellheads and intake protection zones. The campaign included a story map with an interactive map that included the sign locations and a web link back to the Source Protection Authority and area, and involved, in addition to daily social media posts for 3 weeks, a DWSP road sign music video. And you'll see a photo of that video, and you can access it after the session today. And the story map had over 2,700 visits, while the video received almost 1,000 views. So this is an illustration of how education and outreach materials are shared and mobilized. And there are 3 different collaborative channels that this information flows through. Conservation Ontario utilizes the working groups, such as the Drinking Water Source Protection Communications and Project Manager working groups, and other groups such as Media Release, Contacts, Social Media Networks, and CO, Conservation Ontario weekly updates that are shared with all the conservation authorities. The Source Protection Authorities share their municipal partners, share with their municipal partners social media networks. And then the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Park shares with the Source Protection Committee chairs, and also on a gated community of practice site, which has been referred to a few times now, including by Beth. The mobilization of this information creates a collective knowledge and shared access to materials, which inform the public and other stakeholders about our program across the province. So that's it for me. I really want to thank all of you for listening, and for Debbie for developing the deck. And I'm looking forward to the most important local work that's going on. So now I'm going to switch to Madison.
Hi there, thank you so much. And hello, everyone. I'm Madison Keegans, the Source Protection Program Manager with Conservation Sudbury. And I'm happy to be here today to discuss some of the outreach initiatives that we undertake in our source protection area. Next slide. So first, I wanted to provide a bit of an overview of the Sudbury Source Protection Area. So our area spans over 9,000 square kilometers. The majority of the population lives within the boundaries of the city of Greater Sudbury, outlined by the green square. We have 3 surface water intakes in our area and 24 groundwater wells scattered throughout. So overall, our municipal drinking water sources serve about 148,000 residents, which equates to about 85% of the population. We do have one primary municipal partner that implements the majority of our source protection policies, which is the City of Greater Sudbury. Next slide. So a bit about our source protection plan. Our plan came into effect in 2015 and contains 45 policies that use a variety of tools to manage threats to municipal drinking water. So of those 45 policies, we have 7 that use an education and outreach approach. As well, in our area, we have identified some issues that are addressed through the different tools, but are also a focus of our education and outreach. And those include sodium from winter maintenance activities, microcysts and LR and phosphorus from blue-green algae, as well as water quantity in some particular drinking water systems. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the City of Greater Sudbury is the primary partner in our area, and all 7 of those education and outreach policies are directed for the municipality to implement. So I just wanted to highlight a few examples of the initiatives undertaken to implement those policies. First is a program called Earthcare Minute. This airs weekly on CTV before the evening news. And the program highlights the City of Greater Sudbury's environmental programs and provides viewers with related tips to be able to reduce their own environmental footprint. So the target audience for this program includes the general public and especially local landowners who can implement these environmental tips on their own properties. They've covered multiple topics related to source protection, including road salt, phosphorus-free lawn care, and watersheds. Some other methods that are used for engaging with the general public includes providing information pamphlets, so both online and in print, especially distribution at local libraries. And the city of Greater Sudbury also has an online magazine called Green Living, where they publish a variety of environmental articles, including those that are source protection themed. Next slide. So in addition to public engagement with private companies is another important aspect to the outreach conducted here. So one great example I can point to is a virtual event held this winter titled Hold the Salt. And this event engaged winter maintenance companies to be able to discuss the balance between preventing slips and falls and reducing environmental and personal damage. The session provided some information on Smart About Salt training, which helps operators improve their winter salting practices and protect fresh water. And the city of Greater Sudbury also had the chance to discuss their road salt initiatives, including those that are required under the source protection program. So some other ways to interact with private companies in our area includes utilizing public events like home shows to be able to engage with those companies directly and provide source protection information. We noted that utilizing incentives when possible, like for example, offering free Smart About Salt training, is a way to help encourage private companies to participate or adopt source protection practices into their operations. And lastly, we noted that engagement with companies should be tailored to the scale of the company, just to keep in mind resources available at a larger company versus a smaller one to be able to incorporate the source protection practices into their operations. Next slide. The last municipal example I wanted to touch on is the Sudbury Children's Water Festival. So this festival involves all of the local partners that play any part in water management. And the festival invites grade 3 students to learn about the importance of water in the community. It's usually an in-person event that offers hands-on activities for the students, but this year looked a little different, where virtual videos and activities were provided for teachers to use in the classroom. And a tool called Virtual Assembly was also used to have multiple classes and schools be able to attend one large assembly through a webinar, and allowed students to interact during the assembly as well. Next slide. So lastly, I wanted to close off with the outreach that we do as the Source Protection Committee. So the committee has multi-sector representation, with 1/3 of the committee made up of municipal members from the city of Greater Sudbury. 1/3 is made up of industry members from mining, development, and agriculture. And the last third is made up of the general public and environmental NGOs. So in order to engage our committee members and relay information to their represented sectors, we decided to do one-page information sheets on a variety of source protection topics, with an example there on the Walkerton tragedy. So we want to make sure we're utilizing our committee expertise to develop our materials, as well as help them spread the message through their contact networks within their sectors. So looking ahead, we plan to develop some videos for social media, as well as undertake some additional joint efforts with the city of Greater Sudbury. Next slide. And that's it for me. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, my contact information is on the slide.
Excellent. Thank you, Madison. Good morning, everyone. My name is Martin Keller. I'm the Source Protection Program Manager with the Grand River Conservation Authority. And in the next few minutes, I'd like to maybe take a step back and talk about our collaborative municipal partnership approach for source protection planning and implementation, which of course also includes education and outreach. Next slide, Joanne. Thank you. First, I'd like to give you a quick overview of the Lake Erie region. It's situated just west of the Greater Toronto area, as you can maybe see in the little map there, and then the north shore of Lake Erie. It's made up of 4 watersheds, Grand River being the largest of it. To the south, we have Longport region, and then 2 smaller watersheds, Catfish Creek and Kettle Creek, to the west of it, along the shore of Lake Erie. The region is characterized by its very diverse geography and economy, and including large urban centers and small rural towns made up of intensive and agricultural activities and also manufacturing and chemical production. The region is home to the third largest economic area in Ontario, and most of that area is under significant growth and development pressure. From a hydrogeological perspective, the area is also deals with complex overburden and bedrock geology. Next slide. If we look at the source protection specific supplies and where water comes from, Lake Erie region is differentiated that we rely heavily, or municipalities in our area rely heavily on groundwater. That is in contrast to Ontario, where 75% of the water comes from Great Lakes. And specifically, some of our cities, Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Guelph, they almost entirely rely on groundwater for their municipal supplies, and it's fairly unique across Canada with regards to their size. On the other hand, City of Brantford is one of the cities that relies solely on the Grand River surface water for their municipal water supply. Overall, there's about 250 overburden bedrock groundwater wells, and I'd like to note that 62 of them, that's pretty much 25%, a quarter of them, have some kind of issues. We call it elevated concentration of contaminants. That might be nitrates, predominantly as a result of agricultural activities. There could be chloride sodium issues, mostly as a result of road salt use, and TCE, trichloroethylene, and that's in most cases a legacy contamination from manufacturing activities, past activities. Next slide. So what does that all mean? As the lead authority, there is no one-size-fits-all to administer the source protection program in this large and complex area. So at the outset of establishing the program in the early mid-2000s, what is now called the Implementation Working Group was created. The group came in different configurations and names, reflecting the priorities at the time. At the very early stages, there was a planning director and water services group, bringing together the different expertise from the municipalities. Later, there was a project team for policy development. What was common to them, they all were established with formal reporting structures in terms of reference, and they're comprised of representatives of all those municipalities generally that have a role in source protection program. Education and outreach, of course, was one of the key topics for discussions at the implementation, or is now at the Implementation Working Group. But the mandate of the group really goes beyond and covers most aspects of source protection plan implementation and updates. Next slide. So what were we able to accomplish with what we now call our collaborative municipal partnership approach? I think one of the benefits is an inclusive and collaborative policy development process. Not only have we hoped to get practical, feasible, and implementable solutions, but really that approach considers the different municipal needs, including with respect to developing education and outreach products. For example, a large urban center that is concerned about road salt impacts on their wells, they may need a different education, outreach, and awareness campaign than maybe in contrast to a rural community where they are concerned about potential impacts from agricultural activities. So that really just resulted in a more distributed education and outreach model at the municipal level. And that also is reflected in a more broadly with respect to overall plan implementation responsibilities. This approach also means that we as a watershed agency have a more supportive role in bringing together the various parties and agencies. We're kind of the facilitators and sometimes even the mediators. I should also mention that we benefit from the collective actions and work that the Ministry and of course Conservation Ontario do, as you've heard in the presentations before, and we work together with our neighbours as well to share information and learn from each other. Next slide. So in summary, with our collaborative municipal partnership approach, we are able to address issues in Lake Erie region of the Lake Erie region size and complexity. We do recognize the capacity, resources, and expertise of large municipalities, and that allows us to kind of focus our resources and energy to support smaller municipalities where it's needed. That approach also allows those partnerships to evolve differently for each municipality and according to their needs, be it in terms of supporting different education and outreach programs and tools, supporting for implementation challenge in general, or just providing technical guidance and clarifications, or coordination with liaison and with the Ministry, Conservation Authority, or other agencies. So collectively, our collaborative municipal partnership approach delivery model can effectively accommodate the diversity of municipal needs and support source protection plan implementation and updates. Next slide. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. My video on there. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for having me today. I've got lots of pressure. I'm the last speaker before everybody, at least in BC, is going for lunch. Some of you may already be at lunch in the West. Anyway, I'm just going to talk about what we've done in our region. I'm in the Ausable Bayfield Maitland Valley Source Protection Region. I'm west of Martin, south of Madison, and we're on the shores of Lake Huron, where we have big agriculture and a lot of small towns. So if you could advance the slide, please, there. Thank you. So when the pandemic hit, we needed a way to keep our Source Protection Committee engaged. Everybody was in a little bit of a muddle there, and we were trying to figure out how we could help them with doing the outreach and education that they are requested to do for their sectors, as Madison had referred to earlier. And how do you do that when the world shuts down? So one of the things we looked at is we decided to do some videos. As everybody knows, at that point in time, there was everyone was at home, social media usage was surging. So we looked at that and thought source protection is such a huge topic that maybe what we can do is make some bite-sized chunks of it. We could provide some exposure to new demographics that hadn't seen it. We could talk to other groups that have heard from us before, but try and maybe renew the education with them, or give them some more information that they didn't know before. It also, working with our Source Protection Committee members, gave them a sense of purpose when we were in a little bit of a lull, certainly as a lot of things were, as we were trying to figure out how to move forward during a pandemic. And what we did was we actually used our Source Protection Committee members as our local celebrities, as our stars to reach these new groups. So we also really tried to make sure with the videos that we were doing, we were using local streetscapes. They might see faces they know, they might see the water plant that they know, anything to kind of give them a familiar perspective that this is local. This is a local video that has been done. On the last video that we've done, we actually brought in some local industry reps to champion source protection and give it more credibility. And it's also worked incredibly well for getting that sharing done out into the community as well. Next slide, please. So I'll talk to you a bit about these videos that we did. The first one on your top left is our chair, Matt Pearson. And Matt did a little introduction to this series, trying to lead people into keeping to look for these. Now, Matt actually did this just on his laptop, and we prettied it up for him. So it wasn't anything very high tech at all. Next to the right, you'll see Alyssa Keller, who's our public at large representative. Alyssa happens to work for Jacobs, and she is also the water plant operator for the Seaforth water plant, and took us up through the tower virtually. And that worked out really well. And Seaforth, the municipality of Huron East, put it on their page, and it got a ton of views because everybody wanted to see inside those buildings. And just Alyssa herself, being a young 20-something, gave us a whole new demographic that we hadn't had a lot of success in reaching. On the bottom left-hand side, you'll see Roland Howe. He's our industry rep. Roland was previously the manager at the big salt mine we have in Goderich, Compass Minerals, and he also acts as the president of the Goderich Port Authority. And Roland was a great person to have on there because he's already in the media a lot. People know him. Roland has an English background, has a wonderful radio voice, as I call it. So he again, great video coming out of that one talking about spills prevention, because it is actually in the IPZ for Goderich, Intake Protection Zone for Goderich. Next on the bottom right, we have John Graham, and one of our environment reps. John's actually the project manager for a large area here, and he is in charge of running the Goderich water treatment plant, as well as many of the municipal groundwater systems that we have in the area. Again, really well-known person. And again, so much tourism down on the waterfront in Goderich, where you see that water treatment plant. Everybody wanted to know what was in behind those doors. So again, really successful video. If you could change the slide, please, Joanne. Next one up on your top right, Dave Frame, one of our municipal reps. He talked about the drinking water protection zone signs. Dave is one of those guys that everybody knows, and I'm sure you know those people that you have on your committees. Dave's on council, Dave's on Lions, Dave's in foundations, Dave's at every community event. So again, everybody knows Dave, and great response to his. If you go to the right of that with Jeanette Walker, I'm sure a lot of folks have some groundwater models kicking around. I know a lot of our areas, we all use them when we were starting out talking about source protection. We took Jeanette Walker, our environment rep, and we dusted off our groundwater model, and we ran the model and we showed how contamination could happen. And this is an excellent one for schools. I've sent it out to all the schools. They're really interested in using this one. Most of them have some water programming that they do about this time of year. So that one worked really well as well. The last one that we've done, and it's only been released a few weeks, is online mapping tools. So as we had chatted about before with Beth, Forrest, and with Joanne, there is a provincial atlas, the source protection atlas, that gives you interactive online mapping. We were directing people to online mapping. The atlas, our website, the county has online mapping. Ontario Ag Maps has mapping as well. And the reason why we're doing it, and I know this is across the country, we have seen a tsunami of people coming out in our rural area. We used to beg for people, now we have a tsunami hitting us. And what was happening is in the wellheads in a lot of those areas, we were having properties turn over so quick, we kind of couldn't get ahead of the real estate agents and some of the farmers that were leasing land or whatever was happening there to try and make sure they understood about source protection. So we pulled in at this point our two agricultural representatives, Mary Ellen Foran and Bert Dykstra. Then we also brought in Merv Nerb, who's the certified crop advisor, Rick Lobb, who is one of our major real estate players in this area, and one of his staff, Elizabeth. And then Rick was also formerly in charge of the president for the Huron-Perth Real Estate Association. Brought those 5 people together. The video turned out great, and it's gone out all over the place. Our programs that run nutrient management training, certified crop advisor training, administrative agriculture, all those places have picked it up, sent it out to their staff. So that's great. Another one the schools are really interested in because they like doing mapping sessions with their kids. So another really good video. If you could go to the next slide, please, Joanne. So videos work because they reach thousands of people. We've had over 20,000 views in a year. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Ultra high production is not required. We've used cell phone tapeovers. We've used all kinds of things to do this. We do have some of our own video equipment, but if Pluto can get 250,000 views every time Pluto the talking dog puts up a video, and three guys dancing in their basement can get on the Junos, we know that it doesn't have to be perfection to get noticed and get shared. They work really well for municipal websites, for social media. It's something everybody's comfortable with. As I said before, schools are very interested in these. Small ones are about 2 minutes to 10, depending on what the topic is. We've had service clubs contact the SPC members asking them to come out, talk about the videos they did, and give them more information on source protection. And we also I also act as a risk management official. We take it out to our businesses when we're asking them to do staff training. Here's some easy things. They can pull up a laptop or sit around a monitor, and they can pull up something on source protection, do a really quick training if they're doing some regular training with their staff. And I have also, we've also put on our website an actual tab just for videos. So it's really easy for people to come into our website, pick up those videos. Next slide, please. So what do you need before you start? If this is something you think you might want to do, Our chair, Matt Pearson, was on board with this from the time I mentioned it to him. And the committee, even though some of them maybe weren't quite sure they wanted to be on video, as we've been rolling through this, everybody's getting really enthused about this. I mean, we have our own video equipment, but it is not required. There's some great things that have been done in our province without real high-tech equipment, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I did plan the video topics and tried to tag them to the different people that I thought it would work for with their interest and expertise. If it is something that they're familiar with, they're more comfortable to do that for sure. I do write a script every time, especially for the introduction to get them going, and for the close. I give them the meat for the middle, but oftentimes we get pretty spontaneous with that, so long as we're getting the message across, and it flows better if you have some spontaneity in it. As far as funding, MECP, Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, does fund us for per diems for the members that are helping us with this, and some travel costs. And then of course we get general funding, as was mentioned before. So some of the staff time comes out of this. These aren't crazy staff intensive type of videos, because we're not going for ultra high quality. We're going for a good product at the end, but we want a little homey, a little folksy feel to it. What we also do is we always try and give it to our Source Protection Committee members first before it goes out in general public. So if we have a Source Protection Committee meeting, we do it at that. If not, we've gone to just virtual coffee break premieres where we send out a Zoom link and see who can join us for 15 minutes, say hello to each other, watch the video, and then come off again. Next slide, please. So we obviously, for the media plan, YouTube, Facebook, we do boosts with them. It seems to work quite well. Twitter, we do news releases, which may seem a little counterintuitive, but we have excellent coverage on our print media and broadcast media. They've been dying for content for the last year and a half that's not pandemic. So we get really good uptake there. And they all have their own social media channels, so it gets lobbed over to that as well. We add them to our websites, emails. We email them out to municipalities. Our members are great to share them. All kinds of different places we go with them. So the result is that we've had significant print and online media coverage. A lot of interviews we've been doing, whether it's ourselves as staff or as the SBC members as our chair, extensively shared. And we have had a major increase in interest and visibility of source protection. And I get calls, people asking what this is about. So that is really, really great. Next slide, please. So teamwork is everything. Certainly we've been working with our SBC members, and this is a shot of my coworker, Tim. He's our communication specialist and out on the road. And Tim and I kind of work that I create the scripts, I approach the SBC, I set up locations, the times, I get the permission. Tim does the videotaping, he makes the titles, he does the music. We both edit them to what we think we need, try and work on that collaboratively. And then Tim looks after the media launch for the most part. I help him out with some of that. These videos have worked far better than we had ever planned when we first came up with an idea a little over a year ago now, going, what if we did a video so the SBC members can reach their sectors, because no meetings were taking place. And then it just kind of snowballed, and it's going great. We've got another 5 or 6 videos we'd still like to do. So it was the right product for the right time. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much to everybody who just presented. I think your presentation is a testament to how coordinated you are in Ontario. That was seamless. So if the panelists could turn on their cameras, we do have a minute or two, we might go a bit over, but we do have 2 questions in the Q&A that I wanted to bring forward. So the first one is, what is the scale of the budgets for these source water activities? For example, what does the typical local targeted video cost, and the cost of going on local TV?
I could start with the videos. Our videos have really varied. It will be maybe a half a day of staff time to go out and do the videotaping, and maybe a day and a half, 2 days to pull it together. Some of this stuff goes in pretty small chunks as you're moving forward, you know, relaying back and forth with people. But for some of them, they've actually gone pretty well. I would say the ones inside the water treatment plants certainly we spent more staff time on that. Again, we already have the video equipment. We have that is part of the authority anyway. So it's really staff time is what the costs on this are for those video formats. And it could run from say 2 days to maybe 3 or 4 in total by the time we get it all pulled together, but not overextensive, because again, they're short videos. They can't be too long, right?
Right.
Yeah, in terms of the cost to go on the local news station, I don't have an exact amount because the municipality is responsible for funding that piece, but I would say it's definitely on the higher end of cost in terms of getting that video out there. I think Mary Lynn definitely provided some good examples of how you can still make those videos, boosting them on Facebook, doing those news releases. So if you don't have quite as big of a budget, you could still get the word out there.
Great, thank you. And another question that's a pretty big question, but if we just spend a couple minutes discussing it, that would be great. In BC, many watershed planning programs are in place, but without the province's direction to support watershed outreach, education, drinking water programs, etc., it is very piecemeal. Unfortunately, it took Walkerton to bring forward the Clean Water Act in Ontario. How do we bring this vision of watershed protection to the province of BC?
I can start a little bit. I think you just have to keep promoting it. And I think if you go back to, even back as far as the 1940s, and even today, with some of the challenges we're facing at conservation authorities and watershed management in Ontario, it's getting the support of local stakeholders. Your municipalities, our municipalities are very strong partners in not only source protection, but in the work of conservation authorities. And certainly our ag stakeholders and others. I think if you have that momentum of support that you can promote the value of this to the province, that's going to really help. I don't know if any of my colleagues at CAs can share their local perspectives on that too, but it's a lot of work. Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I can jump in with a little bit. Yeah, that's a very tough one. Certainly, having the provincial direction helps a lot. But I would say yes. Start local, start in your own watershed with the municipalities and the other partners that you have locally, and build partnerships that way. And then build it from there. But it's not going to happen overnight. That's building relationship, building trust, and making sure that there's specific goals and objectives that you can deliver on. But yeah, it's a long road. It's not a quick fix.
Yeah, I would agree. And I find in our area, our challenges, we do have small rural municipalities. We don't have the capacity and the staff that you would have in urban centers. So they really rely on us a lot. And definitely, if we didn't have the funding from the province, it would be very difficult to do what we are doing. Just with funding from the municipalities, they're pretty strapped, they're pretty thin. So they do work well with us. And I think too, when Martin and I are definitely working in big agricultural areas, but we've seen a change in the attitude from agriculture in the last 15 years. And self-declaimer, I am a farmer. We farm as well. But with the other programs that are happening in the province around agriculture, many of them related to water, many of them related to the issues in Lake Erie that we've had, and other areas. I think those type of programs that are happening through Ontario Soils and Crop Association, through the Canadian Agricultural Adaptation Programs, those things are starting to change people's mindsets. I have a son that's coming into the ag business. He is applying for all those grants for me because he sees the value in it and he's keen and he wants to get in there. So again, I think as the clock ticks forward, we're seeing a shift and we're seeing a lot more buy-in and a lot more interest. Everybody's getting, and we've got climate change. We've had what's happened in Nunavut. We've got COP26 happening right now. All those things feed into people going, yeah, maybe we should be paying more attention to this, right? So I think we're hitting more of a critical mass where people know we need to put some money into this.
Any final comments before we wrap this up? Any comments from the panelists?
I'll just say thank you very much for inviting Ontario or representatives from Ontario to share our knowledge. And there's more where we came from, and certainly contact, I'll say, Debbie at Conservation Ontario. We have Beth and the speakers here today. But we all go to our CA websites as well, our source protection area websites, and take a look.
Thank you very much again.
Yes, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Great session. Thank you very much, and hope to see the attendees next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.